Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to Food Addiction, Fair and Firm. FAIR stands for Food Addiction is Real. And if you suffer from food addiction, you know exactly how real it is. FIRM stands for Freedom is Recovering Mindfully. I'm going to talk specifically about some fair and some firm issues tonight related to food addiction, so stay tuned. I want to thank you for joining me for this educational and conversational discussion about food addiction. I'm Dr. Connie Stapleton. I've worked professionally in the field of recovery for the past 25 years. I am also very grateful to be able to say I have been in recovery myself from a number of addictions for the past 28 years. That's why I do this program. I want you to know the joys of living free from addiction, and in the process, the program, the fullness of recovery. This program is about food addiction and the process of recovery from food addiction. If you haven't seen the first two videos, then you can see them at my website, which is simply www.conniestapletonphd.com, or tune in on YouTube, and my channel there is just my name, Connie Stapleton. All right, tonight we're going to talk about where do addictions come from and what's the purpose of them. I'm going to share with you some of the quotes from some of my favorite authors on addiction, and this might help you understand why we cling to addictions. Part of why it's hard for us to let go of them, even though we may say, I really, really, really want to let go of this. Because behind every addiction, there's usually a lot of fear lurking. So sometimes, no matter how badly we say we want to let go of an addiction, there's a part of us that wants to hang on to it. And let me tell you a little bit about why that might be. There's a man named John Bradshaw, and he passed away last year, but he's a very brilliant man, and he was very popular, I don't know, for the last 30 years, I guess, maybe even a little longer, but he spoke a lot about addiction and a lot about recovery. And one of the things he said about addictions is addictions are our way of being alive and a way to manage our feelings. So how does that make sense, and what does that even mean, really? When he says our addictions are a way of being alive, a lot of times if we're a little numb emotionally, or we've experienced any trauma or any abuse or any neglect, we may have some depression, we may have some anxiety, and we don't feel fully alive. And so when we engage in our addictions, part of it is because they increase the endorphins in our brain, they increase the dopamine, so we feel more fully alive. So that's part of why we engage in addictions and part of why we continue in them. A bigger part of what he said that I think is important is that our addictions help us to manage our feelings. I'm going to talk a lot about this aspect of addiction over the next many, many weeks, but part of what happens when we turn to food, or we turn to alcohol, or we go on a little shopping spree and spend too much money, or we go gambling, or we spend time on the internet, or whatever it is that we use to escape our feelings or to feel more alive, helps us prevent ourselves from experiencing what we might consider to be negative feelings. So maybe you carry around a lot of stress, or maybe you carry around a lot of sadness related to things in your past or things in your present life, or maybe you carry around a lot of anger. Whatever it is, it's difficult for a lot of us who have struggled with addiction to face our feelings, to face our emotions, the truth of our emotions. For example, I'm kind of a little hothead. I've learned not to be such a hothead over the years, but for me, anytime I would experience sadness is a very difficult emotion for me to handle. And because I didn't want to feel that, I would cover it with a layer of anger, because anger is easy for me. I learned how to be angry in my family. Our whole family grew up learning how to express anger very loudly, and we had no trouble with that. So it's more comfortable for me to feel anger than it is sadness, but I'm not being genuine about my feelings when I do that. And part of our addictions, our behaviors, our mood alterers, in other words, our substances, the food, the shopping, the gambling, whatever it is, takes us away from our feelings because we're not comfortable with them. And there are reasons we're not comfortable with our feelings. We're not going to talk about that specifically tonight, but we will over the next many weeks. But John Bradshaw was saying that, addictions in a lot of ways are ways of managing our feelings. They provide relief. And I believe that to be very, very true for most of us. You may not understand that fully yet. You may understand it completely. But part of the purpose of addictions is to provide us with some emotional relief. So he says that our addictions, and he says compulsivities, the things we feel compulsive about, like I feel like I have to eat this right now, or I have to shop right now, or I have to, whatever it is, just the compulsion. He refers to those as mood alterers. They're what we do, what we develop to help numb ourselves. This is a really important aspect of addiction because addiction helps us to numb. And I think if you've experienced food addiction, you have found that part of the purpose is when you eat, it's like the old commercials for the Calgon, take me away, takes me away from my feelings. And even if it's momentarily, you feel better, even though 15, 20, 30 minutes later, you're back to beating yourself up because you just engaged in some self-destructive behavior. Part of the fairness or the compassion associated with this addiction and recovery is to understand that even though you beat yourself up afterwards, maybe in that moment, and over time you developed this turning to food to numb yourself, maybe that was all you knew how to do at some point in time. And so you developed this addiction sort of in response to having learned a way to feel better than you were feeling, to alter your mood. So in a lot of ways, our substances or our addictive behaviors, the purpose of them is to alter our mood. That's part of why it's hard to give them up, because we don't know what to do with our feelings when we don't have our mood alterer. So keep that in mind. All right. My buddy John Bradshaw also says our symptoms. The symptoms in this case are using the food, using the alcohol, using whatever drug, whatever behavior that numbs us, are unhealthy mechanisms or unhealthy coping skills that we use to keep from feeling our feelings. So really, at some point in time, this addiction, this substance, this behavior probably saved us in some sense. Maybe it saved us from going off the deep end emotionally, or maybe it saved us from, having to address some feelings that were too big for us at whatever time in our life that was. So be compassionate about the fact that this addiction developed from some need that you didn't know how to cope with in a better way. Now, the firm side of that is you don't need that today. You're an adult, and as an adult, you have the capacity to learn to deal with whatever's stressing you, frightening you, angering you, making you sad. You have the ability as an adult to deal with these things in healthy ways, to learn to deal with these things in healthy ways. Because if you knew how, you'd probably have done it by now. But that's part of this program, is about learning the process of recovery. And recovery, to a large degree, is learning healthy coping skills, because addiction, addictive behaviors, addictive substances are used as a coping mechanism to help us do things we don't know how to do, which is deal with our feelings, our emotions, our communication, our overwhelmness in unhealthy ways. So a large part of this is learning to accept our feelings, to deal with our feelings, to understand that our feelings are not going to kill us, and we can learn to deal with them as adults in healthy ways. All right, another one of my really, really favorite authors, speakers, is a guy whose name I can't pronounce worth a darn, but he's a French-Canadian psychiatrist, and his name is Gabor, I don't know, Gabor, and it's Mate, M-A-T-E, with the little French thing on the E. So, jokingly, lovingly, I call him Gabermate. That's not how you pronounce it. But just for fun, I'm going to call him Gabermate, Gabormate. Now, if I were you, I would spend some time on YouTube listening to Dr. Mate. I'll call him Dr. Mate, because he has many, 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 many free YouTube videos where he talks about addiction. And he's very eloquent, and he has a very soothing voice, and you'll learn quite a bit from listening to him. But one of the things he says is the attempt to escape from pain is what creates more pain. So, if you're using food to escape emotional pain, you end up creating more pain. So the attempt to escape from our emotional pain by using food, alcohol, shopping, gambling, sex, whatever it is that takes us away from our feelings, our mood alterers, our numbers, creates more pain. Interestingly, when people seek treatment for an addiction, whether it's food or gambling or whatever it is, they say, I need help with my drinking. I need help with my food addiction. I need help with my shopping addiction. I need help with my sexual compulsivity. That's not the problem. Yes, it's a problem, right? And we think it's the problem, but it is not. None of those substances or behaviors are the problems. They have become problems because we've used them to deal with our real problems. So the process of recovery then, of course, is multi-leveled, right? The first tier is to deal with the substance or the behavior, and we're going to move into that in a minute. So, of course, we've got to get rid of the alcohol or the food that is our addictive food, or the gambling or the credit cards or whatever it is. We have to get rid of the behavior or the substance. And so then people might think, well, I got rid of that. It's all good. But true recovery, true healing, true freedom from addiction means that you deal with the issues that you turn to the substance for in the first place. So recovery does not just mean being sober. So a lot of people in AA will be sober, but they are not in recovery. A lot of people with food addictions may get rid of the substance that they're addicted to, but they're not in recovery. It's called a dry drunk. That's the generic term for it. It means getting rid of the substance or the behavior, but not dealing with any of the issues. So in this program, in these weekly programs, we are going to be talking about the wholeness, the fullness of recovery. The first part of that, of course, is getting rid of the trigger foods. But the rest of it is going to be learning to deal with the issues that were the problems in the first place. So, again, the attempt to escape the pain, which is the use of food, creates more pain. Because now you've got issues related to the food and the health and the weight and the blah, blah, blah. All right. Dr. Mate also said addiction is oftentimes self-medication. Same thing, meaning I don't want to feel how I feel, so I self-medicate. I'm not necessarily self-medicating physiological symptoms, but I'm also self-medicating psychological symptoms. That's all I'm going to say about that right now, but there's more to it, of course. Now I want to talk a minute about the difference between physiological addiction and psychological addiction. Physiology, of course, refers to the body, your physiology. So a physiological addiction happens when your body either gets hooked on or needs the drug to feel normal, and I'll give you an example in a minute, or when the substance is removed, there are physical and maybe some emotional withdrawal symptoms, all right? So alcohol by itself is not an addictive substance. If somebody has one drink of alcohol, they're not automatically going to be addicted to it. If somebody has a Hershey bar, they're not automatically addicted to Hershey bars. However, some people, this is kind of complicated, some people's physiology, their brain, like the first time I drank, you'll hear a lot of people talk about alcohol and say, the first time I drank, I knew I was an alcoholic. And for me, I think that's true because the first time I ever drank, and I was 16 years old, and there was no off switch. There was no off switch where a lot of people go, ooh, you know, I'm feeling weird, I'm feeling fuzzy. That's enough for me. There's no off switch when I drink. So I think my physiology just didn't have that off switch. Some people, when they eat sugar, simple carbs, they have this thing in their brain where they respond differently. It's almost like an allergy to these chemicals. Like I think I have an allergy type reaction to alcohol. So that's a physiological reaction. But a physiological dependence, when a person drinks alcohol for a long period of time, eventually the cells in their body physically need the alcohol. And if they don't have it, they're going to get those withdrawal symptoms. They're going to shake, they're going to sweat, they're going to vomit, So at that point, there's a physiological addiction. So people drink to avoid the shakes, or they drink to avoid those withdrawal symptoms. The same can be true with food, because there's a lot of research that says when a person who's addicted, physiologically addicted to sugar, simple carbs are the main categories of food substances that cause this kind of addiction. But when they're removed, people have very similar physiological withdrawal symptoms as do people who are withdrawing from alcohol. They get nauseous, they get shaky, they have fuzzy brain, they can't think so clearly, they may vomit, those are physiological symptoms of withdrawal. With alcohol, there are stages. I was never physically addicted to alcohol. Sure, I might have a hangover, which you do have some withdrawal symptoms, but I didn't need alcohol all day, every day, so that I wouldn't go into withdrawals. I was never physiologically dependent to the point that I had to have alcohol in my system all the time. I was psychologically addicted to alcohol. A lot of people are psychologically or emotionally addicted to food. In other words, there's no physical need to keep withdrawal symptoms away, but there's a psychological need. I thought that if I drank, and I knew that if I drank, I could numb my emotions. I didn't want to feel my emotions. So I would drink to numb myself. After I got married, and we're going to talk about, and I am talking about actually addiction transfer here. After I got married, my husband was not a drinker. All my drinking friends had been in college, so I wasn't going to sit around and drink every night with my husband there and, having a baby. It just wasn't something I was going to do, but I still did not want to feel how I felt. So I used pain medication that I had gotten for a prescription for migraine headaches. So it was a legitimate prescription. And I never used enough of those to where I got physiologically addicted, but I still didn't want to feel. So every other day, or whenever I started getting too upset about something, if I was dealing with my family of origin, or if I had something big, I would take one and I wouldn't feel, right? So food, for some people, they know if I'm stressed or if I'm anxious, or if I'm worried, they have learned that if they eat certain foods, they feel better. What they've done is numb their emotions. Excuse me. It's a temporary feel better. It's an emotional numbing agent. So with psychological or emotional addiction, there's a perceived need. I don't need it to avoid withdrawal. I need it because I think it's going to make my world better. There's a compulsion. I think, I have to have this food because I know I'll feel better. And this can occur with any substance. It can be food, it can be cleaning, it can be the internet, it can be the credit card or shopping because you get a little bit of high, right? Addiction is a brain disease. And we get an increase in certain neurochemicals. Even when we think about certain foods, we can get that boost in neurochemicals. And that's one of the things that I'm very fair about with food addiction, because food addiction, my God, there are triggers everywhere. And even the triggers alone, a billboard, a commercial, a restaurant, your favorite fast food, just the logo can trigger some of those neurochemicals, and it makes you feel better. So, and make you crave and want and have that compulsion for those foods. So this is powerful stuff. To be fair, to be compassionate. Food addiction is so real, and it's so difficult, partly because the triggers are everywhere. Partly because, which I hear from almost everybody who has a food addiction, you have to eat to live. And that is very, very true. Now, flip side of that, the firm side of that is true. Yes, you need to eat to live. You don't need to drink alcohol to live. You don't need to have cocaine to live. You have to have food to live, which, compassionately speaking, makes it extraordinarily difficult. But the firm side says there are several thousands of foods. You do not need processed sugar to live, right? So that's part of the firm part of me. And I can get pretty firm when it comes to recovery from addiction. Transfer addiction. There were some posts in the Food Addiction Fair and Firm Facebook group. Can we talk about transfer addiction? That's such a great question. And what transfer addiction means is you simply switch from one chemical or substance to numb your emotions from one to another to another to another. So for me, I would say that my first form of addiction came in the form of food. But for me, it wasn't the consumption of food. It was the control of food in terms of not eating. But the compulsion, that's all I thought about. That's all I thought about. That's all I thought about. That's all I thought about from the minute I woke up to the time I went to bed. The purpose of that in my life was really important. And when I look back on this, as painful as that time of my life was, and it is definitely one of the most painful times of my life, was that year and a half or so that I was so obsessed with food and the control of food and not eating of food. But when I look back, what was going on in my life was that I had left home for the first time. I was 17 years old. I went away to college, and I never, ever knew what such extreme loneliness felt like. I didn't know people. My family from home, which was like 4 hours away, didn't call and say, how are you? Are you alive? I just felt like no one would know if I was alive or dead for at least 3 weeks. And that excruciating loneliness. I had no coping skills. I didn't know how to deal with it. And so my focus became very narrow. And as long as I could focus on food, I did not feel that excruciating pain. I didn't feel the worry of the stuff going on with my family at home, which was really not good at that time. So when I say addiction serves a purpose, even though it was a horrible time, I'm grateful that I had the creativity to find something to keep me sane, even though it wasn't a very sane time. It kept me putting one foot in the other. Now, when I got to the point that I was less than 90 pounds, and I'm like 18 or 19 years old by this time, I knew I was going to die if I didn't do something. So I still hadn't developed any coping skills. I still hadn't learned any way to handle these emotions, but I found alcohol. So that served a couple of purposes for me. I put some weight on, not only from the alcohol, but when I would drink, and I was now socializing because I was more social when I was drinking. We would go out to eat after we were drinking. So it put some weight on me, which literally saved my life, but it also kept me numb, so I still didn't have to feel. When I got married, the drinking thing was not cool because my husband didn't drink, and we were moved away from our college town and our college friends, and so I found pain medication. So it served the same purpose. It was just a different substance or a different behavior. So that's what transfer addiction is. So the bottom line is the issues are still the same. So it wasn't until I went into a treatment program, even though I wasn't physiologically addicted to any of these things, my life was a mess. And I didn't know how to deal with life as an adult. I didn't know how to deal with my feelings. So I went to an outpatient treatment program, flushed the medication down the drain, never had another drink, and had to use that group of people as support. Had to use the classes in that treatment program to teach me, A, what my feelings were, which is why on the daily sheet I have you address what I felt sad, mad, glad, and scared about every day, so you learn what your feelings are, and then we learn how to deal with them in healthy ways. As you do that, you don't need to numb yourself emotionally. That's what recovery is about. Okay, so to be firm, you have to eat to live. Triggers are everywhere. But to be fair, listen, nobody's going to do this. I can't do this for you. Your friends can't do this for you. Your support group, OA, nobody can do this for you. And even if I could, what I have learned is that I wouldn't. Because if I did, you couldn't learn what you needed to learn through this process. But what I ask you to do is hang tight with us. Hang tight. We're going to work on learning how to live without your drug or your drugs, because a lot of people have more than one addiction going on at the same time. So we're going to learn how to live without those, and we're going to deal with the deeper issues and help you learn how to deal with your feelings, how to find effective, healthy adult coping mechanisms. And then you're not going to need those things anymore. And that's one of the things you can say to yourself. I don't need this anymore. Now, Vera Tarman, as you know, wrote Food Junkies, which I've been telling every one of you to read because it's an absolutely amazing book that will help you understand the physiology of addiction, the physiology of food addiction, what happens with your brain and your body. She says, abstinence first, absolutely. What that means is you got to quit using the substance. She says to treat food addicts, it is necessary to detoxify your brain. I mean, getting the crap, the sugar, the simple carbs that cause a brain fog, can't think clearly or make the best decisions when you're using a substance. To detoxify your brains, removing from their diets the trigger food that starts their cravings. So the first thing you got to do, and this is hard, okay? It's very difficult. You got to eliminate whatever your trigger foods are. And this is individual. Some people have a trigger food. Some people have 3 trigger foods. Many food addicts have categories of trigger foods. And the most common categories are simple carbs and sugar. Added sugar, refined sugar. If you don't know what a simple carb is, it's like grits, rice, anything made with white flour, potatoes, starchy foods, simple carbs. Had somebody contact me earlier saying they were on a low-carb diet. If that low-carb diet includes simple carbs and you're a food addict, that might not work because it's not elimination of the trigger food. I'm not sorry to say, although I am sorry to say it's difficult, you've got to do it. If you want recovery, if you want to get to the layer where you can learn to deal with things effectively, you have to be willing to let go of the trigger foods. And you might not be yet, and that's okay. This is a process. But if you're not willing or ready to let go of the trigger foods, then we need to start asking, what's my resistance about? What am I afraid of if I let go of these things? That might be something you can be asking yourself, all right? So after the elimination of the trigger foods, then we have education about the disease of addiction, about how to remain abstinent, about how to deal with cravings, about how to set boundaries, about how to communicate yourself effectively, about really good, healthy coping skills. Now I have a treat for you, which is a very special, once every 3 or 4 months kind of thing. I do this class called Gain While You Lose. It's a 10-week class about how to stay on track with your health weight. One of the sessions, week 3, is all about food addiction. It's a 90-minute class, and it's Monday, this next Monday. I'm going to Facebook Live it, so if you have time, please sit in. I will post the video, but this whole 90 minutes is going to talk about emotional eating and food addiction and a whole bunch of information. Yes, we'll be covering that in this weekly program too, but this is a really good, succinct way to get a really good idea about food addiction. So if you're available Monday night at 5:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, it will be Facebook Live. I will also have the video available to you. So, lots of stuff covered tonight, right? And every week we're going to talk about different topics. And I'm trying to gauge from the comments I've been getting, from the topics that are being discussed in the group. And I please encourage you to go to that group. Put your questions out there. Put your suggestions for people. There's amazing information on that in that group. So if you're interested in being part of the Facebook group, just let me know. I'll add you to it. Thank you again so much. I can't thank you enough for spending your time with us doing this Facebook Live, or coming back later and watching these videos and sharing these with your friends, because food addiction, any kind of addiction, your friends don't have to be food addicts, but anybody you know who's struggling with addiction can watch these videos, because addiction is addiction, and underneath the umbrella of addiction, whatever the behaviors or the substances are, the issues are very similar. So I appreciate all of you who thank me, but the thanks goes to you. Thank yourself, please thank yourself for reaching out for help, for tuning in to listen, to finding out more information. And remember, the process of recovery requires immersion, meaning seek out information about addiction, seek out information on recovery, seek out information on healthy coping skills. We'll be addressing all of this over the months and weeks to come. But we have a limited time, so immerse yourself. Go to meetings, whether that's OA, AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, intherooms.com has all kinds of 12-step meetings. If you don't like 12-step meetings, that's fine. Go to your support groups from your bariatric centers. Go to your friends. Get together for coffee. But get in touch with support people every single day. Use the daily forum. My goodness, just use that forum. It keeps you thinking along the lines of recovery. All right? Work on getting rid of the substance. Abstinence first, absolutely. All right. Hey, stay tuned on Facebook tonight or tomorrow because I have another really exciting announcement to make, even though it has nothing to do with recovery or addiction. It's just exciting. So thanks again for joining me. I look forward to your comments, your feedback, your questions, and let's keep doing this together because we can do this. Recovery is possible. And that's another thing you can see on the Facebook Food Addiction Fair and Firm group. People are sharing their successes, and it's joyful. So thanks again for joining me. I'll talk to y'all soon. Have a great, great night. Good night.